The Grand Nebula Hotel floated like a diamond-encrusted crown at the intersection of the 7 most prestigious space lanes in the Andromeda sector. Through its crystalline lobby windows, the spectacular triple sunset of Centauri Prime painted the marble floors in shades of gold, crimson, and violet. Zira Kesh adjusted her silver-threaded uniform for the 100th time that morning, her forearms moving in perfect synchronization as she preened before the holographic mirror behind the front desk. The mirror, naturally, was for the benefit of the guests. A Melidraxian of her status would never be caught dead admiring their own reflection in public. At least that's what she told herself. Approaching guest, Category 4 species chirped her neural assistant. Zira Kesh's upper lip curled in disgust, revealing a hint of her pearlescent teeth. Category 4. Barely above primates, her primary eyes remained fixed on the registration terminal, while her secondary set tracked the approaching human female. "Welcome to the Grand Nebula Hotel," Zira Kesh proclaimed in her most artificially pleasant voice. "Do you have a reservation?" She already knew the answer. These types never did. The human woman, wearing what appeared to be last season's Venusian silk and carrying an embarrassingly outdated quantum purse, smiled nervously. "Yes, actually, under Sarah Whitmore." Zira Kesh made a show of checking the system, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface with practiced grace. The reservation was there, unfortunately. "Ah, yes, I see you've booked our standard suite." She pronounced standard as if it were a communicable disease. The woman's smile faltered slightly. "That's right. Is there a problem?" "Not at all," Zira Kesh replied, her secondary arms reaching for the key card fabricator, "though I should inform you that our standard suites are typically reserved for diplomatic functions. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Star Stop Inn down in the commercial district? They cater to a more," she paused deliberately, "casual clientele." Sarah Whitmore's face flushed red. Such an unattractive feature of humans, Zira Kesh thought. The woman straightened her spine, clearly trying to maintain her dignity. "I'll keep my reservation, thank you." "As you wish." Zira Kesh programmed the key card with exaggerated slowness. "Do try to remember that the anti-grav pools are reserved for Category 1 and 2 species between the hours of—" "Darling, is there a problem?" a melodic voice interrupted. Ambassador El Reth, one of the hotel's most prestigious regular guests, glided up to the desk. Her bioluminescent skin cast a soft blue glow over the marble counter. "Not at all." Ambassador Zira Kesh's tone transformed instantly into honeyed warmth. "Just explaining our facilities to a new guest." El Reth's compound eyes studied Sarah with genuine interest. "Wonderful. I do so love meeting humans. Such fascinating creatures. My dear, you must join me for tea in the Nebula Lounge. I'd love to hear more about your planet's quaint customs." Before Zira Kesh could intervene, the ambassador had whisked Sarah away toward the lounge, chattering enthusiastically about human culture. Zira Kesh's 4 hands clenched in frustration. Trust a luminary to find something worthwhile in every species. Next guest approaching, her neural assistant chimed. "Category 4, again." Zira Kesh suppressed a groan. When she'd applied for this position, she'd imagined herself rubbing shoulders with the galaxy's elite. Instead, she spent half her day dealing with barely evolved primates who'd somehow scraped together enough credits to play at being civilized. She watched a group of Arcturian nobles drift past the lobby, their anti-grav platforms humming softly. Now those were proper guests, Category 1 species with the wealth and breeding to appreciate the Grand Nebula's sophistication. Not like these humans who treated the galaxy's finest hotel like some common tourist trap. "Welcome to the Grand Nebula Hotel," she recited as the next human approached, already planning how to redirect them to a more suitable establishment. After all, she had standards to maintain, the hotel's reputation to protect. Little did Zira Kesh know, her perfectly ordered world was about to be turned upside down by a human who would teach her exactly why making assumptions about species categories was the biggest mistake of her career. The afternoon rush had just begun when he walked in. Through the grand entrance of the most prestigious hotel in the Andromeda sector came a human male covered in what appeared to be Zira Kesh's 4 hands trembled in horror engine grease. His work boots left subtle marks on the immaculate marble floor, and his gray jumpsuit bore the stains of honest labor. Security breach detected, her neural assistant warned. Unauthorized maintenance personnel. The human approached the front desk with an easy, confident stride that made Zira Kesh's secondary heart skip a beat. How dare he act so comfortable in these surroundings? "Good afternoon," he said, voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Name's Jack Thompson. I believe you folks might be expecting me." Zira Kesh drew herself up to her full height, all four arms crossing in disapproval. "Sir, the service entrance is located on sub-level 3. All maintenance contractors must check in with facilities management first." Jack Thompson's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Oh, I'm not here for maintenance." "Well, not exactly. I have a reservation." A burst of startled laughter escaped Zira Kesh before she could suppress it. Several nearby guests turned to observe the scene, including a group of Neptunian nobles whose water-filled environment suits sparkled in the fading sunlight. "A reservation," Zira Kesh's voice dripped with condescension. "At the Grand Nebula Hotel." "That's right," he pulled out a datapad, grease-stained fingers leaving marks on its surface. "Under Thompson." Zira Kesh made a show of checking the system, though she knew she wouldn't find anything. "I'm terribly sorry, but I see no such reservation. Perhaps you meant to book the Star Stop Inn? They're much more accommodating to workers." The Neptunian nobles burbled with laughter inside their suits. A passing Venusian socialite paused to watch, her feathered antenna quivering with barely concealed amusement. "Interesting," Jack said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe try checking under the owner's list." The owner's Zira Kesh's laughter turned brittle. "Sir, I don't appreciate attempts at humor. The Grand Nebula caters to an exclusive clientele, Category 1 and 2 species predominantly. We simply cannot accommodate someone in your condition." The crowd of onlookers had grown. Ambassador El Reth emerged from the Nebula Lounge, Sarah Whitmore still at her side. The human woman's eyes widened at the scene unfolding before them. "My condition," Jack glanced down at his jumpsuit. "You mean honest work? Last I checked, that wasn't a communicable disease." Security Zira Kesh called out, her patience wearing thin. "Please escort this person to the appropriate exit." Two Drachnid security officers materialized from their posts, their chrome-plated exoskeletons gleaming. "Sir," the larger one rumbled, "please come with us." "Now hold on," Jack raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you'd just check the system." "The only misunderstanding," Zira Kesh announced loudly, playing to her audience, "is your belief that you could simply walk into the finest hotel in the galaxy looking like you've just crawled out of a maintenance shaft." The gathered crowd murmured in agreement. Even Sarah Whitmore, despite being human herself, took a step back, clearly not wanting to be associated with this grease-covered intruder. "You know what?" Jack's easy smile never wavered. "You're absolutely right. I apologize for disrupting your afternoon. But before I go, would you mind calling your manager? Just to confirm I'm not welcome here." "Our manager is currently in a meeting with the owner," Zira Kesh lied smoothly. "Though I'm sure they would both agree with my assessment of this situation." "The owner, you say?" Jack's eyes sparkled with something Zira Kesh couldn't quite identify. "Well, that's convenient. When will they be done?" "Security," Zira Kesh snapped. "Remove him." The Drachnids moved forward, their metal appendages reaching for Jack's shoulders. The human stood his ground, that infuriating smile still playing on his lips. "Last chance," he said quietly. "You might want to check that owner's list." "Remove this human immediately," Zira Kesh commanded, "and have maintenance clean up any residue he may have left on our floors." As the security officers began to guide Jack toward the exit, a new figure entered the lobby. The hotel's head manager, Mr. Blackwood, hurried across the marble floor, his face an interesting shade of green. "Wait," he called out, voice cracking. "Stop everything." Zira Kesh turned all four eyes toward her superior, ready to explain the situation. But the words died in her throat as she saw the look of absolute terror on Mr. Blackwood's face. Something told her she had made a terrible, terrible mistake. "Mr. Thompson," Sir Mr. Blackwood's voice quavered as he rushed forward. "Please accept my deepest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding." The gathered crowd fell silent. Even the Neptunian nobles stopped burbling. Zyra Kesh felt all four of her arms go numb as the implications slowly sank in. "No apology necessary," Marcus Jack said warmly. "Just doing a routine inspection. You know how I like to check the basic systems myself." He gestured to his grease-stained jumpsuit. "Had to crawl through the maintenance shafts to check the quantum field generators. They were a bit out of alignment." The Drachnid security officers had already retreated, their chrome exoskeletons somehow managing to convey embarrassment. Ambassador Elreth floated forward, her bioluminescence pulsing with delight. "Jack Thompson," she announced to the stunned crowd. "The Jack Thompson, the human who revolutionized interstellar hospitality, the self-made billionaire who started as a maintenance worker and now owns the largest luxury hotel chain in 3 galaxies." Zyra Kesh felt her primary stomach drop through the floor. Her secondary hearts were racing so fast she thought they might explode. The owner. She had just tried to throw out the owner. "The very same," Jack confirmed, turning to face the gathering. "Though I prefer to think of myself as a mechanic who got lucky." Speaking of which, he pulled out a handheld diagnostic tool. "The quantum stabilizers in the West Wing are showing some concerning readings. Might want to get maintenance on that, Marcus." Mr. Blackwood nodded frantically, inputting notes into his datapad. "Right away, sir. And about the reception you received." "Actually," Jack raised a hand, "I'd like to address that." He turned to face Zyra Kesh, who was doing her best to blend into the marble walls behind her. "Mind if we have a chat about the Grand Nebula's guest policies?" The crowd parted as Jack approached the front desk. Several guests who had been laughing earlier suddenly found the ceiling absolutely fascinating. Sarah Whitmore, still standing beside Ambassador Elreth, watched with undisguised interest. "Mr. Thompson," Sir Zyra Kesh began, her voice barely a whisper. "I had no idea." "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Jack leaned against the counter, leaving a small grease smudge that made Zyra Kesh wince. "You had no idea who I was, so you felt comfortable treating me like something stuck to the bottom of your shoe." "I was simply following protocol for unauthorized." "What protocol?" Jack's eyes hardened slightly, though his smile remained. "Let me tell you about protocol. 20 years ago, I was working maintenance on a small station in the Orion Belt. Minimum wage, Category 4 species status, barely scraping by. But I noticed something. The quantum field generators the big hotels were using, they were inefficient, wasteful, dangerous even." He pulled up a holographic display, showing complex engineering schematics. "So I designed a better system. Worked on it during my breaks, tested it after hours. When it was ready, I tried to present it to hotel management." His smile turned wry. "Want to guess how that went?" Zyra Kesh felt her face burning with shame. She could imagine exactly how it went. "They wouldn't even look at my designs," Jack continued, "because I was just a maintenance worker, a Category 4 species. Sound familiar?" The gathered crowd shifted uncomfortably. Several of the Neptunian nobles had the grace to look ashamed inside their environment suits. But one person did look. A human woman named Margaret Chen, may she rest in peace. She was a cleaning staff supervisor who'd worked her way up to middle management. She saw potential where others saw grease stains. Jack's voice softened with memory. "She helped me get a patent, invested her life savings in my first prototype, and when it worked, when it revolutionized hotel energy systems across the galaxy, she became my first business partner." He straightened up, addressing the entire lobby now. "The Grand Nebula wasn't built by Category 1 species sitting in luxury suites. It was built by maintenance workers crawling through access tunnels, by housekeepers working double shifts, by receptionists." He glanced pointedly at Zyra Kesh, who put in long hours dealing with difficult guests. Ambassador Elreth's bioluminescence pulsed in approval. "Hear, hear!" So Jack turned back to Zyra Kesh about that reservation. Mr. Blackwood hurried forward with a key card. "Your usual suite is ready, sir, though perhaps you'd like to freshen up first." Actually, Jack checked his diagnostic tool again. Those quantum stabilizers really do need attention. Mind if I take care of that first? Wouldn't want our Category 1 and 2 guests to experience any gravitational irregularities. Without waiting for a response, he headed toward the maintenance access panel, boots leaving slight marks on the marble floor. As he passed the front desk, he paused. "Oh, and Zirakesh," his eyes twinkled. "Might want to update your files. Humans were officially upgraded to Category 2 status last month. Something about their remarkable ability to solve problems that other species deemed impossible." The lobby erupted in conversation as Jack disappeared into the maintenance shaft. Sarah Whitmore was grinning broadly, while Ambassador Elreth's skin glowed with amusement. The Neptunian nobles had made themselves scarce, their environment suits leaving trails of embarrassed bubbles in their wake. Zirakesh stood frozen behind her desk, all four hands clutching the counter for support. Her perfectly ordered world had just been completely upended by a grease-stained human who owned not just the hotel, but her entire understanding of species categories. And somehow she had a feeling this was only the beginning of her education. The next 24 hours at the Grand Nebula Hotel were unlike anything in its prestigious history. Word of the incident spread through the staff quarters faster than a quantum transmission. By midnight, 3 different versions of the story had made their way through every department, from the anti-grav pool attendants to the zero-gravity gardeners. Zirakesh sat in the staff break room, all 4 of her arms wrapped around a cup of Martian coffee that had long since gone cold. Her colleagues gave her a wide berth, though she caught snippets of their whispered conversations. "Did you hear?" She tried to have him thrown out. "I heard she called him a maintenance crawler to his face." "My cousin works at the Star Stop Inn. She says they're already turning it into a marketing slogan, good enough for Jack Thompson, good enough for you." The door slid open with a soft hiss, and the break room fell silent. Jack Thompson walked in, still wearing his grease-stained jumpsuit, though he'd cleaned his hands. Everyone scrambled to stand at attention. "At ease, folks," he said, heading for the coffee machine. "Anyone mind if I grab a cup? Been working on those stabilizers for 6 hours straight?" Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Jack shrugged and poured himself a cup, then pulled up a chair right next to Zirakesh. The sound of it scraping across the floor made her wince. "So," he said conversationally, "rough day?" Zirakesh's voices came out as a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, I cannot begin to express my regret." "Please," he interrupted, "call me Jack. Mr. Thompson was my father, and he was a much better mechanic than I'll ever be." He took a sip of coffee and grimaced, though he probably would have fixed these stabilizers in half the time. The break room remained silent, everyone watching the exchange like it was a high-stakes poker game. Jack looked around at the frozen faces and sighed. "All right, everyone sit down." That's an order. He waited until they complied. "Now let's talk about what happened today, and more importantly, what's going to change." Mr. Blackwood burst through the door, datapad in hand. "Sir, I have the termination paperwork ready for." "Put that away," Marcus Jack said firmly. "Nobody's getting fired today." Zirakesh's secondary hearts, which had nearly stopped at the word termination, slowly resumed beating. She risked a glance at Jack, who was studying the coffee machine with professional interest. "You know," he said, "this is one of the original QC 3000 models. Beautiful machine. But see that slight discoloration on the power coupling? That's a sign the quantum filter needs cleaning. Probably why the coffee tastes like it was brewed in a warp core." He stood up and began disassembling the machine with practiced ease. As he worked, he continued speaking. "The Grand Nebula was built on a simple principle: luxury for all who can afford it, not luxury for all who look like they can afford it." His hands moved swiftly, removing parts and cleaning them with supplies from his pocket. "Starting tomorrow, we're implementing new policies. First, all staff will undergo cultural sensitivity training. Not just about different species, but about different professions too. Second," he held up a grimy filter, "maintenance staff will have access to all areas of the hotel. They're not second-class citizens, they're the backbone of this operation. Without them, this place would fall apart faster than a Plutonian marriage contract." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Jack smiled as he reassembled the coffee maker. Third, we're abolishing the species category system in our guest protocols. From now on, we have 2 categories: guests and staff. That's it. He pressed the power button and the machine hummed to life with a sound smoother than a solar sail. And finally he turned to Zyra. We're promoting our front desk staff to guest relations specialists. More authority, more responsibility, and yes, better pay. Zyra blinked all 4 eyes in confusion. Sir Jack, I don't understand. After what I did. You did exactly what you were trained to do, he said, pouring 2 fresh cups of coffee. The problem isn't you, it's the training. So we're going to fix that. He handed her a cup. Starting with you leading the new cultural sensitivity programs. The break room burst into surprised murmurs. Zyra nearly dropped her coffee. Me? But I'm the last person who should. You're exactly the right person, Jack interrupted, because you understand both sides now. The prejudice and the shame of being wrong about it. That's valuable experience. He addressed the room again. The Grand Nebula is about to enter a new era. We're going to be the first truly universal luxury hotel. A place where anyone, regardless of species or profession, can experience the best the galaxy has to offer, he grinned. As long as they can pay the bill, of course. We're not running a charity here. The tension in the room finally broke, replaced by genuine laughter. Staff members began sharing their own stories of prejudice and misconceptions. A Drachnid security officer admitted he'd once thrown out a Jovian ambassador because her environmental suit looked like maintenance equipment. A zero-gravity gardener confessed to hiding her university degrees because she thought they'd make her seem overqualified. As the conversation flowed, Jack pulled out his diagnostic tool once more. Now, if you'll excuse me, those quantum stabilizers aren't going to align themselves. Unless he glanced at Zyra. You'd like to learn how they work. She looked down at her immaculate uniform, then at his grease-stained jumpsuit. A day ago, the very thought would have horrified her. Now, I would be honored, she said, standing up. Though perhaps I should change into something more appropriate first. Jack's eyes crinkled with approval. There might be a spare jumpsuit in maintenance. Fair warning, though, it'll completely ruin your manicure. But for the first time that day, Zyra laughed genuinely. Worth it, she said, to learn from the best. As they headed toward the maintenance shaft, she heard the break room erupt in excited chatter behind them. The Grand Nebula Hotel was changing, and somehow she had ended up at the heart of that change. Maybe, she thought, Category 4 species weren't the only ones with hidden potential. 3 months passed like a meteor shower, brilliant, transformative, and faster than Zyra could have imagined. Her education began in the maintenance tunnels, learning the intricate dance of quantum mechanics from Jack Thompson himself. It wasn't just about fixing machines, it was about understanding the heart of the hotel, the invisible systems that kept their floating paradise running. See this coupling? Jack pointed to a seemingly insignificant joint where 2 power conduits met. They were cramped in a maintenance shaft, and Zyra 4 arms were covered in grease up to her elbows. Humans designed it differently than the standard galactic model. Everyone said it wouldn't work, the angles were wrong, the materials too simple. Zyra studied the mechanism, seeing it with new eyes. But it does work. Better than the original. Know why? Jack grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead and leaving a streak of grease. Because we didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. Humans have a bad habit of achieving things they're told can't be done. The lessons continued beyond the maintenance shafts. As head of the new cultural sensitivity program, Zyra found herself learning more than she taught. She organized interspecies staff dinners where Drachnid security officers shared meals with Venusian chefs. She watched maintenance workers teach anti-grav pool attendants about engine repair, while housekeeping staff gave lectures on advanced xenobiology. One evening, during a staff gathering in the Nebula Lounge, Ambassador Elreth asked her, "What's the most surprising thing you've learned?" Zyra considered the question carefully, all 4 eyes taking in the scene before her. A human maintenance worker was explaining Earth's concept of jazz to a fascinated group of Neptunian nobles. A Plutonian guest was getting an impromptu lesson in cocktail mixing from the hotel's bartender, their environmental suits adapted to handle the shakers. "That we're all maintenance workers," she answered finally. "We're all just trying to keep our little corner of the galaxy running smoothly." Reth's bioluminescence pulsed with approval. Jack would love that answer. Speaking of maintenance, a familiar voice chimed in. Jack Thompson emerged from behind a decorative quantum fountain, tool belt still strapped around his waist. "The artificial gravity in the West Wing is acting up again. Anyone interested in a practical lesson in field manipulation?" To everyone's surprise, 3 Arcturian nobles volunteered immediately. Their anti-grav platforms were deactivated as they eagerly followed Jack toward the maintenance access panel. "Remember when they wouldn't even look at maintenance staff Sarah Whitmore?" Now the hotel's events coordinator remarked to Zira Kesh. "Now they're fighting for a chance to crawl through the tunnels." The changes weren't just social. Under the new policies, the Grand Nebula's efficiency ratings had skyrocketed. When every staff member understood how the hotel's systems worked, problems were spotted and fixed faster. When guests from all species and backgrounds felt truly welcome, they recommended the hotel to others. Zira Kesh's own transformation went deeper than she'd expected. She still kept her uniform immaculate old habits, dyed hard, but now she wore it with a different kind of pride. Not the pride of status or appearance, but the pride of being part of something genuinely revolutionary. One morning, as she was checking in a new guest, a nervous-looking Martian trader, who clearly wasn't used to luxury hotels, she noticed something off about the lobby's quantum field. The slight vibration in her secondary arms told her the harmonics were misaligned. Without hesitation, she excused herself from the desk, grabbed a tool belt from the concealed panel Jack had installed, and fixed the problem herself. When she returned, the Martian trader was staring at her in amazement. "You're the first receptionist I've ever seen who could do that," he said. "Guest relations specialist," she corrected with a smile. "And at the Grand Nebula, we believe in understanding every aspect of our guests' comfort." She handed him his key card. "Though if you're interested, I'm teaching a basic quantum mechanics class for guests next week. We still have a few spots open." The trader's expression brightened. "Really? I'd like that." Later that day, during the staff meeting, Zira Kesh shared her latest idea, a program where guests could learn about hotel operations if they were interested. Not just tours, but hands-on experience with the systems that made their stay possible. "It breaks down barriers," she explained. "When you understand how something works, you respect it more. And when you work alongside someone different from you, you stop seeing categories." Jack finished, nodding approvingly. "You just see people." Mr. Blackwood, who had finally stopped looking terrified every time Jack appeared in work clothes, pulled up the hotel's latest ratings. "We're now the highest-rated hotel in 3 galaxies," he announced. And the comments. "Listen to this one. For the first time in my travels, I felt like a person, not a category." The meeting room erupted in applause. Zira Kesh felt her secondary heart swell with pride. She caught Jack's eye across the room, and he gave her a knowing wink. "Not bad for a Category 4 species and a stuck-up receptionist, huh?" he said later as they worked together on the quantum coffee maker that had become their unofficial project. "Guest relations specialist," she corrected automatically, then laughed. "Though I suppose titles matter less than actions." "Now you're getting it." Jack handed her a quantum spanner. "Speaking of actions, this power coupling isn't going to clean itself." As they worked together in comfortable silence, Zira Kesh reflected on how far she'd come. She'd learned more than just mechanics and management. She'd learned that true luxury wasn't about status or appearance. It was about creating a space where everyone could be their best selves, regardless of what category the galaxy had assigned them. And sometimes the best way to learn that lesson was to get your hands dirty. 1 year to the day after the infamous incident, the Grand Nebula Hotel hosted the Galactic Hospitality Awards. The grand ballroom sparkled with the combined glamour of 1,000 worlds. Beings of all species and backgrounds mingled freely, their environmental suits and anti-grav platforms creating a spectacular light show against the backdrop of the triple sunset. Zira Kesh stood at the podium, her silver-threaded uniform complemented by the tool belt she now wore with pride. All four of her hands were steady as she addressed the crowd. "Welcome to the Grand Nebula Hotel," she began, "where luxury knows no categories." The audience applauded appreciatively. In the front row, Jack Thompson sat in his trademark work clothes, grinning broadly. Beside him, Ambassador L. Reth's bioluminescence pulsed with joy, while Sarah Whitmore dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "1 year ago, I thought I knew what luxury meant," Zira Kesh continued. "I thought it was about appearance, about status, about keeping the wrong sort of people out." She paused, meeting the eyes of various guests. I was wrong. True luxury is about bringing people together, about creating spaces where everyone can learn from each other, grow together, and yes, sometimes get their hands dirty." The crowd chuckled. A group of Neptunian nobles raised their environmental suits in a toast, the same nobles who had once mocked Jack Thompson. "Under our new management approach, the Grand Nebula hasn't just maintained its 5-star rating, we've redefined what 5 stars means. Our maintenance class for guests has a 6-month waiting list. Our cultural exchange programs have been adopted by hotels across 3 galaxies. And last month, we became the first hotel to receive the Galactic Unity Award for breaking down species barriers." More applause. Mr. Blackwood, standing near the back, was practically glowing with pride. "But perhaps our greatest achievement," Zira Kesh smiled, "is that we no longer need to announce these achievements. They've become simply who we are. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the person who taught me that the best way to judge someone is by their actions, not their appearance or species category. Please welcome." The lights flickered. The artificial gravity hiccuped. Several anti-grav platforms wobbled precariously. Jack Thompson was already on his feet, diagnostic tool in hand. "Quantum field destabilization," he announced. "Primary generator must be acting up." "I'll handle it," Zira Kesh said automatically, reaching for her tools. Actually, a new voice called out, "I've got this one." The crowd parted to reveal a young Arcturian noble, her ceremonial robes already exchanged for a maintenance jumpsuit. She was one of Zira Kesh's first students in the hotel's engineering program. "Take notes, everyone," the Arcturian said with a grin. "This is a practical demonstration of quantum field harmonics in formal event conditions." As she disappeared into the maintenance shaft, followed by an enthusiastic group of guests and staff members eager to watch and learn, Zira Kesh caught Jack's eye. They shared a knowing look. "Should we help?" she asked. "Nah," he settled back in his chair. "Sometimes the best management is knowing when to let others take the lead." The lights stabilized moments later, accompanied by cheers and applause from within the maintenance tunnel. The Arcturian emerged, grease-stained but triumphant, to a standing ovation. "Well," Zira Kesh said, returning to the podium, "I suppose that demonstrates our hotel's philosophy better than any speech could. At the Grand Nebula, everyone's a maintenance worker when they need to be. And everyone's a valued guest regardless of what they're wearing or what category they once belonged to." She raised all 4 hands in a traditional Maladraxian gesture of respect. "So please enjoy your evening. And if you notice any quantum fluctuations, well, there's probably a quantum mechanics class starting somewhere nearby." The crowd laughed and applauded one final time. As the formal ceremony transitioned into dinner and dancing, Zira Kesh made her way to Jack's table. "Not bad," he said, handing her a diagnostic tool. "Though the quantum harmonics in the East Wing are still a bit off." "Already on it," she replied. "I've got a group of Plutonian diplomats who've been begging for a hands-on lesson." "You know," Jack mused, "there's an interesting irony here." "Oh. A year ago, you tried to throw me out for looking like a maintenance worker. Now you've got the galaxy's elite literally lining up for the chance to do maintenance work." Zira Kesh laughed, all 4 eyes twinkling. "The greatest irony? I finally understand what true luxury means, and I learned it in a maintenance shaft." Speaking of maintenance, Jack stood up, brushing off his perpetually grease-stained jumpsuit. "Those Plutonian diplomats won't teach themselves, shall we?" As they headed toward the maintenance access panel, followed by an eager group of formally dressed guests, Zira Kesh couldn't help but smile. The Grand Nebula Hotel had indeed become the galaxy's most prestigious hotel, not despite breaking down barriers between species and classes, but because of it. And somewhere in a parallel universe, she imagined her former self watching in horror as the galaxy's elite voluntarily crawled through maintenance shafts in their finest clothes, all in the name of luxury. Now that, she thought, was truly the grease monkey's last laugh,